The terminal buzzed with restless energy, the kind only airports seem to create. The smell of coffee, recycled air, and quiet anxiety hung in the air like static. Gate 47 glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights, its display flashing the familiar message, now boarding, Group 1. Somewhere in the crowd, a man named Ethan Ward shifted his weight and glanced at his phone, absently stirring the last of his lukewarm latte. He was used to airports, used to delays, waiting, and the quiet chaos of travel. What he wasn't used to was the sound of fury brewing just a few steps away. A sharp voice sliced through the noise of boarding calls and rolling luggage. "Excuse me!" This has to be some kind of mistake. The voice belonged to a woman in a bright yellow dress that caught every beam of light in the terminal. Her name, printed clearly on the boarding pass she clutched like a verdict, was Lauren. Mid-40s, perfectly styled blonde hair, and a confidence that bordered on command. She stood with one hand on her hip, the other raised toward the boarding sign as if summoning divine correction. The gate agent, a young woman named Melissa, stood calm behind the counter. Her posture showed the patience of someone who had seen every type of travel drama. "Ma'am, we're currently boarding Group 2. Your ticket says Group 4. We'll call your group shortly," Melissa said politely. Lauren's brow furrowed. "Group 4? That can't be right. I paid extra for Comfort Plus. I always board early. Always." Melissa checked the screen again, her tone steady. "That's correct, ma'am. Premium economy boards with Group 4. The word economy might as well have been an insult. Lauren's expression hardened, her lips parting in disbelief. "Premium economy? No, that's wrong. I was promised business class when I booked. You've made a mistake." Ethan looked up from his phone. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but Lauren's voice carried like she expected the world to listen. Around them, a few passengers pretended not to notice while clearly watching. A man in a gray hoodie gave a quiet whistle, and a mother gently pulled her child closer, steering clear of the growing scene. Melissa stayed composed. "Ma'am, your ticket shows seat 17A, which is in premium economy. If you'd like, I can double-check." Lauren cut her off. "You don't need to check anything. You just need to fix it. I fly this airline all the time. I know how this works. I should be boarding before them." She gestured toward the line forming at the gate, her manicured finger landing squarely on Ethan. Ethan blinked, caught mid-sip. "Me?" he asked, half amused. Lauren gave him a dismissive once-over. "Yes, you. No offense, but I should be ahead of that line. Look at him. He doesn't even look like he flies often." Ethan set down his cup and smiled, the kind of calm smile that hides irritation. "You'd be surprised how much I fly," he said evenly. "Group 3 isn't exactly first-class privilege." Lauren turned away with an exasperated scoff. "This is absurd. I'm not standing here while people who paid less than me get priority." Melissa's polite tone didn't waver. "Ma'am, please step aside so we can continue boarding. I'll be happy to recheck your ticket once Group 2 finishes." Lauren folded her arms, refusing to move. "No, I'm not going anywhere until someone fixes this. I want to speak to a supervisor." The air thickened. Passengers hesitated mid-step, and the boarding line slowed as eyes turned toward the confrontation. The announcement chime echoed overhead, but the rhythm of travel was already broken. A nearby security officer exchanged a look with Melissa, who nodded subtly, signaling she had it under control. Ethan leaned back, watching the drama unfold. He'd seen plenty of airport arguments, canceled flights, lost bags, but this felt different. Lauren's anger wasn't frustration. It was entitlement sharpened into arrogance. Every word she spoke carried the certainty that rules were for other people. Moments later, the supervisor arrived, a tall man in his 40s with calm eyes and a headset pressed to his temple. "Good evening, ma'am," he said smoothly. "What seems to be the issue?" Lauren wasted no time. "Your agent made a mistake with my boarding group and my seat. I paid for business class and I expect to be treated accordingly." He nodded, taking her ticket. "Let me take a quick look." As he scanned the pass, Lauren continued her tirade. "This whole thing is unprofessional. You're holding up paying customers and embarrassing me in front of everyone." "You're embarrassing yourself," someone muttered from the crowd. The words were quiet but clear enough. Lauren spun around, eyes blazing. Who said that? Her glare swept the area until it landed on a teenage boy pretending to look at his phone. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, your seat is listed here. Premium Economy, Row 17, Group 4. The system confirms it." Lauren's confidence cracked into disbelief. "No, that's wrong. I'll call corporate right now. Lauren began fumbling for her phone, her hands trembling more from indignation than nerves. They'll sort this out, she muttered. Of course, you're welcome to contact them, the supervisor replied evenly. But the boarding process will continue as planned. A ripple of soft laughter passed through the waiting crowd. It was quiet, but Lauren heard it. Her face flushed and her voice rose again. You people have no respect. I've been a loyal customer for years. You can't just treat me like some regular passenger. Melissa kept her smile, though the fatigue showed in her eyes. Ma'am, please stand aside so we can continue boarding Group 3. That number stung. Group 3. The very thing she believed she was above. Lauren's lips parted. But before she could speak, Ethan rose from his seat, slinging his laptop bag over his shoulder. He approached the line calmly, offering Melissa a polite nod. Group 3, he said, showing his pass. His tone was light, but his words carried a quiet sting. Lauren's glare snapped toward him, sharp and venomous. Oh, so you get to board before me now? Wonderful. Ethan didn't look back. Guess I'm just following the order, he said, his voice steady. For a moment, no one moved. The tension hung in the air like a held breath. Then Melissa scanned his ticket and the gate beeped softly. Ethan walked down the jet bridge, leaving behind the echo of Lauren's sputtering indignation. Behind him, the supervisor lowered his voice, speaking directly to her. Ma'am, if you can't follow boarding procedures, we may need to make a note of your behavior. Please take a seat until your group is called. Lauren stared at him, uncomprehending, as if the concept of consequences was foreign to her. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flicking toward the onlookers still watching. For a fleeting moment, something uncertain crossed her face. Doubt, maybe even shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She turned sharply and sat down, muttering under her breath, clutching her purse like a weapon. Around her, the crowd's rhythm returned, the sound of boarding reclaiming the air. The brief storm had settled, but a quiet tension lingered like static before lightning. From down the jet bridge, Ethan glanced back once. Through the glass, he could still see her, rigid, fuming, framed beneath the glowing sign of Group 4. He exhaled softly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Something told him this wasn't over. Lauren's pulse thudded in her ears. She sat stiffly in the molded plastic chair, her reflection fractured in the glossy floor beneath her heels. The gate agent's voice droned in the background. Now boarding Group 3, but all she heard was humiliation. That smug man, Ethan, walking past her like some seasoned traveler, the quiet chuckles that followed. The faint smirk she swore she saw on Melissa's face. No, she wouldn't let it end like that. Not after paying nearly $900 for her ticket. She deserved better. When Group 4 was finally called, Lauren rose with deliberate grace, smoothing the creases from her dress. Her expression had hardened into calm defiance, the kind of stillness that comes before the next explosion. Melissa greeted her with the same steady professionalism. Boarding pass, please. Lauren handed it over without a word, her chin lifted high. But as Melissa scanned the code, the machine emitted a low, uncertain tone, not the clear approval beep that had signaled everyone else's turn. A small red light blinked on the screen. Melissa frowned slightly. Looks like your seat assignment's been updated. Lauren's eyes narrowed. Updated? What do you mean updated? One moment. Melissa tapped a few keys, her brow furrowing deeper. It seems there was a change. I'll need to call my supervisor to confirm. The words sank in slowly like cold water creeping under a door. A change? There shouldn't be any change, Lauren snapped. I haven't requested anything. You'd better fix whatever you did. I didn't do anything, ma'am, Melissa replied softly. But I'll get someone to take a look. She pressed the intercom, calling for her supervisor. Ethan, already seated in business class, leaned back as passengers continued boarding. He wasn't trying to listen, but when the muffled sound of raised voices reached him, curiosity tugged at his attention. Through the narrow crack of the open cabin door, he caught a flash of yellow fabric. He smiled faintly. Back at the gate, the supervisor arrived with his clipboard. Ms. Lauren? He asked evenly, reading her name from the boarding pass. Can I have a word, please? She followed him aside, her posture rigid with annoyance. If this is about that so-called boarding issue earlier, I've already explained everything. Your employee was rude, dismissive, and completely unhelpful. I understand you're frustrated, the supervisor said smoothly, his tone calm. However, our staff reported that your behavior became disruptive. According to airline policy, we reserve the right to make seating adjustments if a passenger's conduct interferes with operations. For a moment, she didn't process it. Then her voice cracked with disbelief. Seating adjustments? What kind of adjustments? He met her eyes, firm but polite. You've been reassigned to a different section of the plane. Her hand tightened around the boarding pass. Reassigned to where? Economy, ma'am. The words hung in the air like a dropped plate. Her jaw slackened. You can't be serious. The supervisor didn't flinch. It's already been processed. You'll receive a partial refund after the flight. Around them, passengers pretended not to stare, but their glances betrayed them. A young couple exchanged amused looks. The man in the gray hoodie from earlier coughed to hide a laugh. Lauren's face burned red. This is outrageous. You can't just decide that. I paid for premium. I was promised certain privileges. Melissa's expression remained steady. Privileges are based on both fare class and conduct, ma'am. Lauren's breath quickened. She could feel control slipping through her hands. The supervisor remained calm, unaffected by her outrage. Around them, boarding continued, each soft beep of the scanner a reminder of her defeat. Finally, she hissed, "You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone hears about it." Of course, the supervisor replied evenly. You're free to file a formal complaint with customer relations. There was nothing left to say. Lauren snatched the new boarding pass from Melissa's hand and stormed toward the jet bridge. Her heels striking the floor in furious rhythm. The red print on her ticket mocked her. Seat 32B. Inside the aircraft, the air was cool and sterile, scented faintly of disinfectant and coffee. She marched down the narrow aisle, her dress brushing armrests and bumping shoulders as passengers made room. Quiet apologies followed her, but none registered. The bright yellow of her dress now drew every eye in the cramped cabin. When she reached row 32, a man was already seated by the window, earbuds in, oblivious. A teenager in the middle seat looked up nervously as she approached. "Excuse me," she said tightly. "That's my seat." The man stood to let her in without a word. She squeezed past, her perfume cutting through the stale cabin air. As she sat down, the seatbelt clicked shut, final and metallic. She stared straight ahead, hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale against her skin. Up front, Ethan reclined in his wide seat, calm and collected. He wasn't the type to gloat, but he couldn't ignore the balance in it all. He'd seen arrogance rewarded too often in life. It was rare, almost satisfying to see it corrected this quickly. The hum of the engines deepened as boarding finished. A flight attendant walked through the aisle, checking seat numbers on her tablet. She paused briefly at row 32, confirmed something, and moved on. Lauren noticed and leaned forward. "Excuse me, miss. When will drinks be served?" The attendant smiled politely. "Once we reach cruising altitude, ma'am. In business class. They start earlier," Lauren muttered. "I'm sure they do." The attendant replied kindly before continuing down the aisle. Lauren sank back into her seat, swallowing her frustration. Around her, passengers chatted softly, reading or scrolling through their phones. She felt surrounded yet unseen, just another traveler among many. No one cared who she was, what she'd paid, or what she thought she deserved. For the first time, her outrage had nowhere to land. The seatbelt light chimed. The engines roared louder and the plane began to move. Ethan glanced toward the curtain dividing business and economy. He could almost picture her sitting back there fuming, rehearsing her next complaint to customer service, her indignation burning hotter than the engines beneath them. The thought made him smile faintly. Justice, he thought, didn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needed a gate number. Midway through the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin. The captain's voice came over the speakers, calm, steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We're experiencing some light turbulence." Ethan buckled up, watching clouds roll below. For a brief moment, the shaking of the plane echoed the tension that had filled the terminal hours earlier. Somewhere beyond the curtain, a drink rattled on a tray table. In row 32, Lauren gripped the armrest as the plane shuddered. A teenager beside her, calm and relaxed, gave her a reassuring smile. "It's just turbulence," he said. "Happens all the time." She nodded stiffly. "I know," she replied. But her voice was small now, the confidence drained away. When the shaking stopped, the unease lingered. A flight attendant came by with a tray of water bottles. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked. Lauren hesitated, pride still raw. Then softly, "Just water." "Of course, ma'am," the attendant said, handing it over with a gentle smile. Lauren took a sip. The water tasted bitter, metallic. She set it down untouched, her reflection trembling faintly in the plastic cup. Up front, Ethan adjusted his seat and closed his eyes, unaware of the buzz from his phone. A message from a friend had just arrived, a link to a video. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation at Gate 47. The caption read, "When entitlement takes flight." Morning light streamed through the cabin windows in thin golden bands. The plane had landed an hour ago, but the story that started at Gate 47 was only beginning. The air outside the airport was sharp and bright, the kind that felt like a reset. But for Lauren, it only deepened the sting of what had happened. She walked briskly through the terminal, phone in hand, the echo of her heels cutting across the tile. Every step carried the weight of humiliation disguised as determination. For 2 hours, she had been crafting a furious email to the airline. In her mind, it would fix everything. An apology, compensation, acknowledgement. The world would finally know how unfairly she had been treated. At a nearby cafe, Ethan sat quietly with a black coffee cooling beside his laptop. He wasn't thinking about Lauren, not really. Just idly scrolling through his notifications while waiting for his connecting flight. Then he saw it. A familiar thumbnail caught his eye, a still frame of the boarding gate, the yellow dress unmistakable. The video title read, "Passenger loses it over boarding order, instant karma ensues." He clicked it. There she was. The entire scene, the raised voice, the demand to board early, the calm response from the supervisor, captured in vivid detail. Someone had filmed the whole confrontation from the seating area, probably the man in the gray hoodie. The video already had more than 200,000 views in less than 12 hours. Ethan watched, caught between disbelief and inevitability. The comments were brutal. She really thought the world revolved around Group 4. Gate 47, where entitlement gets downgraded. Memes, slow-motion clips, even remixes of her shouting filled the screen. He closed his laptop, unsure whether to laugh or feel sorry. For a moment, he felt a flicker of sympathy. But when he remembered how she'd spoken to that young gate agent, it faded. Actions have echoes, he thought. Hers were just louder than most. Lauren's phone buzzed relentlessly as she reached the taxi line. Notifications stacked up in a cruel rhythm. Texts, mentions, messages from coworkers. Her stomach twisted as she opened one. A coworker had sent her a link with 3 words. "Is this you?" Her throat tightened. She tapped it, the video played. Her own voice filled the speakers, sharp, defensive, unmistakable. On screen, her face twisted mid-sentence, her gestures tense with anger. It was like watching a stranger. What stared back wasn't confidence. It was entitlement, raw and unflattering. No one at the terminal had said her name, but it didn't matter. Someone in the comments had found her social media profile, matched her face to a company photo. Within hours, her name was spreading faster than the video itself. Lauren Grant. The internet had found a new villain. And she had no defense left that didn't sound like an excuse. In the back seat of the taxi, she called the airline, her voice trembling with the same defiance that had failed her earlier. "I want to file a formal complaint," she said. The customer service agent's tone was calm but careful. "Of course, ma'am. Could you please confirm your booking number?" Lauren rattled it off quickly. There was a pause, the quiet tapping of keys. Then the agent spoke again. "I do see a note on your file regarding the incident at Gate 47. It appears your ticket was reviewed under our conduct policy. Unfortunately, any disputes about that decision will need to be submitted in writing. Written correspondence." The words sounded cold and final. She hung up, the weight of reality pressing down on her chest. Outside the window, traffic shimmered in the midday heat, but she barely saw it. For the first time, she wondered if she had gone too far. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat at his next gate waiting for his connection. 2 travelers nearby were talking animatedly. "Did you see that video? The lady who got downgraded for yelling at staff?" One said. "That was wild." "I can't believe people act like that in public," the other replied. Ethan smiled faintly, not out of mockery, but at how small the world could feel when a single moment went viral. He didn't mention that he'd been there, watching it all unfold in real time. Some stories didn't need his version. they told themselves. Meanwhile, Lauren sat silently, scrolling through the comments. Each one hit like a wave. Every attempt she made to explain herself only brought more backlash. I was mistreated by the staff, she typed under one clip. But her words were buried beneath replies. Sure, Karen, maybe follow the rules next time. Premium attitude, economy.
Manners, her chest tightened.
She turned off her phone and stared out the window. For the first time all day, the silence felt safer than the noise. Days passed. The video hit 1 million views. News outlets picked it up, calling it a snapshot of modern entitlement. Commentators debated it, strangers dissected it, and Lauren's name became a cautionary tale. For a while, she stayed home. She avoided eye contact at the grocery store, ignored calls from friends, and scrolled past every headline that mentioned the word gate. But no matter how far she tried to step away, the story followed her, a shadow that refused to fade. Ethan's life moved on. Another airport, another gate, another coffee. The faces blurred, the flights blended together. Yet every now and then, when someone mentioned airport drama or viral clips, he remembered her, the yellow dress, the raised voice, and the strange sense of balance that had unfolded in real time. It hadn't been about gloating. It was something quieter. The satisfaction of seeing arrogance finally meet consequence. A small correction in a world that too often looked the other way. A week later, fate decided to draw their stories together again. Almost. Ethan was boarding another flight with the same airline when he noticed a familiar name flash across the upgrade list at the counter. Grant, she was listed for consideration, pending approval. The irony didn't escape him. The gate agent, someone new, typed a few keys, frowned, and shook her head slightly. Denied, she murmured, marking the note on her screen. Ethan said nothing. He simply handed over his boarding pass and smiled politely. Group 3, he said, just as he had before. The scanner beeped softly, approving his entry. As he walked down the jet bridge, a calm washed over him. The scent of jet fuel and recycled air filled his lungs, familiar, grounding. It felt like closure, not triumph. Behind him, the faint murmur of voices carried through the terminal, swallowed by the hum of engines and boarding calls. The world turned on, steady and indifferent. At the counter, Lauren watched the screen flicker. Her name flashed once, then disappeared. For a long moment, she stood still, and then, for the first time in a long time, she felt it. Something quiet, almost fragile. Regret. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just a small ache in her chest, real and undeniable. She clutched her boarding pass tighter, took a steady breath, and stepped forward toward the economy cabin. This time, she didn't look for anyone to move aside.